and for a very, very long time, she resented, you know, war and what my dad went through because of it. So when I sat down in 2020, during COVID, my aunt passed away, my father's sister, who he was very close with as a child, and he wrote her a letter in Vietnam.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast. As we grow older, the imagination becomes an underutilized skill that was once vibrant in youth. The ability to dream the impossible atrophies and gets lost with the passage of time. Part of the beauty of children is the ability to see the world without limitations and without boundaries. Those that cultivate the mind's ability to create maintain this superpower. They see the world through the lens of possibilities and not just realities, becoming a wordsmith that allows those around them to briefly see and create their own world. Having a visual representation of a story stifles the mind. The dormant skill of creating your own is located deep inside us all. There are some that are there to stimulate this lost ability. I'm Kevin Donaldson, always here with Mike Falaise. Tom Flynn will be sitting in tonight, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's the stories that we highlight, and that's what we like here. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content, and now you can join. And of course, follow us on all social media so you can find out what we're up to. On this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome one of our new friends, and that's Keith Sargeant, to talk about the suffering of a journalist. Keith knows how to paint those pictures. I've read your stuff, and you can... So that's what's cool about writing, and that's what I love about writing as opposed to movies. I get to make the movie in my head. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Before we get into anything, a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as police or as podcasters, but we do trust Toyota of Hackensack. So go to toyotahackensack.com and let them find you a car. So, Keith, each week we take a question from our audience. This week's question, I like this one too. It comes from Stickler's mom. So, the question came in, and maybe it'll take a little bit of explaining. Is it talent, a learned skill, or hard work? So, whatever you do, whatever you do in your life, anything you're good at, is it a talent, is it a learned skill, or is it hard work?
It's all three, all the above. You have to be born with it. I don't think there's anything that you can do, in life where you have to be born into it. There's nothing that you could do without hard work, right? Experience. In my mind, like whatever you do, you're only going to get good at it, by doing it more and more and more. Experience. There's no substitute for experience. So I think it's probably all three, but again, I think that you have to be born into it. I think whatever you are, I think so many jobs I think you were born into.
Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat there. I think there's actually a fourth ingredient, and hard work, I think, is coupled with discipline. There's no substitute for discipline. Having a schedule, keeping to it, keeping yourself accountable, it enhances the other two. You can learn a skill, but discipline is absolutely necessary.
And discipline will give you the freedom to move inside whatever your vocation is. It is a combination of all three, but there's one ingredient here that Stickler's mom did not put in here, and that's passion. You have to have a passion for it, because everybody has a talent. Some people's talent might be just, putting their hands together and making a fart sound with it. Like, that might be their talent, right? But if it comes easy to you, you're never going to appreciate it. But if you have a passion for something, even if you don't have as much talent, that internal drive will make you learn that skill. And guess what? Before you know it, you'll be able to work within those boundaries of whatever you're trying to do, and you'll realize that, yes, I do have a talent, but a talent is born out of that passion for whatever it may be. Podcasting, I didn't know what I was doing with a podcast. It took me time to develop any type of skill but I had a passion for it. So there's my first building block. And then on top of that, I learned that skill, and then I found out maybe there was a hint of talent, but ultimately that hard work that kind of goes hand in hand with discipline. You got to have that discipline to put in the hard work, and then good things happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best answer that I can give on that one. But I will say this. So I have met some people that are really talented at certain things, athletics, okay? So you were a football writer. You've seen this more and more where somebody will be ultra talented at football. And they never have to work at it. They're always the best at it. And one day they're going to be met with that obstacle. And that talent is not going to take them past that obstacle. And you're going to watch them quit and you're going to watch them fall because it's always come easy to them. So, Stickler's mom, thank you so much for sending that one in. Keep sending in your questions, and we will try to get them on the air. And while you're at it, go to 234 Franklin Avenue. Go over see Gus at Cubita Cafe. Tell him the Suffering Podcast sent you. You're going to have some of the best food you ever had from a classically trained chef. And one thing about Gus, he's not in the food business. He's in the people business. So go over see Gus at 234 Franklin Avenue in Nutley, New Jersey, to the Cubita Cafe. And once again, tell him we sent you. So Keith, you had the interesting opportunity to come in and sit with Andrew a while back when we were recording the episode 188, The Suffering of Mike Falaise, and you watched us in here doing our thing. And now you're back so we can sit and talk about you because you and I, when we first met, we sat down in a diner, of which I got stuck in traffic with. It made me crazy. I never am late for anything. And you were telling me, I was outside, you started telling me about your father. Mm-hmm. So it made me really interested in how you grew up. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I'm going to start from like the middle probably where most people know me as a sports writer. I haven't been covering sports for 4 or 5 years, I guess, since COVID. Covered Rutgers football for 20 years. That's kind of what people know me. That's the reason why I have a, Twitter following, and so I'll start from the middle. But I grew up in Middlesex County, Old Bridge, South Amboy. I was born in. Had a nomadic childhood. Parents, were on and off. My mom and dad really fought, a lot, but they worked at it. They always, the common bond was me and my brother. They always tried to make it work. My father, there were times where he wasn't, in the picture, and there was times when he came back, and my mom took him back, and always tried to make it work. My mom was one of the hardest working people, worked in catering, restaurant business, and kind of where I get the work ethic from. Learning from my mom, she would raise us and always have food on the table when we got home, but then she would have to go to work at 4 o'clock and work in a seafood place until 11 o'clock, midnight or whatever.
So your mother did whatever she needed to do.
Always to put food on the table and to pay the rent and whatnot. My dad was a Vietnam veteran who, in 1981, when I was 6 years old, almost died. He had liver disease. A lot of people associate liver disease with like alcohol. Didn't really drink much at the time. He had it from Agent Orange. From he as I always say, he served in the shit. Served in Vietnam in 68, 69.
But there was no bugs.
Oh no, there were bugs.
But that's so the Agent Orange. It took me a while to learn that. Yeah. Agent Orange was laid down to try to kill some of the bugs in there.
Yeah, and defoliate.
Downside, cause cancer. A lot of people got cancer because of Agent Orange. So he got hit from, when did he serve?
He served in 68, 69.
Oh,
right in the middle of like the Tet Offensive and like some of the some of the worst fighting.
So his the on again off again relationship between your mother and your father, did that have to do with his wartime experience?
No doubt. And as a kid you don't know that, right? I mean, I love my dad, and my dad was, my mom kind of resented him for a long time because he was the hero. She was the one working and doing all the stuff that she needed to do, and he was the one who would take us to the, get baseball cards and comic books, and he was a fun guy, right?
The fun time.
He was
Disneyland.
He was the grandparent. He was the grandparent.
Correct.
Feed him, get him sugared up, and send him home.
Looking back on it, he didn't really hold a job. He was he worked in the post office, delivering mail, after Vietnam, worked in a couple of warehouses, but for the most part, I never really remembered him working until maybe in like the early '90s or whatever. That's when he kind of had to. But for the most part, he never really worked. And my mom was the one who was, basically, breaking her back, literally breaking her back. She had back surgery in the '90s, and really her life, went downhill after that. But yeah, my dad, you don't look back on it. It took me, well after he died to kind of put the puzzle together. I know you're probably going to ask, a little bit about the story I did on my dad, but it took me a long time to kind of figure out, there was a reason why my dad, I mean, he was thrust into a war at 18, 19 years old, and saw stuff, that no one can even imagine. I mean,
Well, think back to your 18-year-old self. I do it all the time. I think back to my 18-year-old self. I wasn't prepared to see any of that stuff.
no doubt.
And these guys just, keep going. Push through this awfulness. And then when they came home, and very few people realize that, they see Sylvester Stallone, right? So they see Sylvester Stallone, he's Rocky and everything. But when he first made Rambo, like Rambo was a really revolutionary movie. And I understand that there's a lot of fiction behind Rambo, but the core of Rambo is Vietnam vets came home and they didn't feel like they fit in anywhere. Nobody wanted them. They didn't feel good about what they did. And now they're trying to adjust and normalize themselves in life.
Disposable heroes, right?
Right. That's a great way to put it. Disposable heroes. Did you ever see any outbursts from your father or any signs of that post-traumatic stress?
No, but he had a drug problem, pills mostly. I never remember smoking pot or anything like that, but I didn't know the extent of it until years later. But cocaine and some stuff like that. But yeah, mostly pills, mostly anything you can really get. But for a very, very long time, he had a drug problem. And
what kind of pills? We're talking
Percocet, and anything in that realm.
And that's God. And what's the years that it really?
1981 is when he got sick. Kind of brought him back. My mom was the hero. I wrote about that in the in the story I'm writing about it in the book. That like basically they read him his last rites, and South Amboy Hospital kind of gave up on him. My mom stood on on his chest. You're not going, and really in a time where you didn't really have all that the information at her fingertips. Called New York, every hospital in New York, every liver specialist in New York, got him on a helicopter to Mount Sinai, and within a couple months brought him back to life. And we got another 25 years out, 24 years. He died in 2005. So my mom saved his life in 1981. But when he, I remember like drips and drabs of it, right? Like where like he was, I'm a big Dodger fan. I'm a big, baseball fan.
I'm
right?
very sorry about that.
Yeah, condolences.
So we grew up. That was kind of our summers. Like we would follow the Dodgers and whatnot. In 1988, they went to the World Series. It was Game 1.
Tommy Lasorda.
Yep. And we were going through a lot of family issues. My parents were separated. She welcomed him back, and he was living there. He said he was going to go out to get soda or popcorn or whatever. Like right before, maybe during pregame, be right back. Never came back.
Really?
So you remember the Gibson home run, and
Sure.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
we're
he could
all,
hardly walk. Yeah, he had like the bad thigh bruise or
so
something.
we're all like just like we couldn't believe it. It was one of the great sports moments that we could never remember. And he walked in like right when it happened, so he missed the entire game. Like he said he was going to go out for milk and whatever. But
How old were you at that point?
Oh God, 88. So I was 13, 12 or 13.
All right.
Yeah.
Through a child's eyes.
Yeah. So but you don't really put two and two together. I mean, my mom tried to hide it as much as she could, but
Your mom's the hero.
No doubt.
Your mom's the hero because when is your mom still with us?
No, she passed away.
She passed away. Did she ever sit there and talk to you about anything that did with your father?
She again, she forgave him for all of it, and when he got really sick in 2005.
I just want to point out what's on my mug.
I love it.
Forgive.
Yep. When he got really sick in 2005, he was sick for about 6-8 months or whatever, and she was at the hospital every day.
But she saw something in him
Oh, he had a good heart.
that transcended
No
the
doubt.
damage from the war.
Probably.
And that's why I say your mom is the true hero in this, because while your father was doing some of these things that weren't very conducive to a relationship, she saw something in him to keep bringing him back into your life. Yes, I understand that it's you and your brother. I get that, but there's got to be something there that she saw. Like, it's unfortunately women think they can fix us. There's really not a whole lot of fixing.
No.
And God bless them for doing that stuff, because they believe in us more than we believe in ourselves.
You are a good interviewer, by the way, and you do get to the root of it, because there's no doubt about it. And for a very, very long time, she resented, war and what my dad went through because of it. So when I sat down in 2020, during COVID, my aunt passed away, my father's sister, who he was very close with as a child, and he wrote her a letter in Vietnam pretty much every day that he was over there. I never had any of those letters until she passed away. She passed away in 2012. My uncle gave me a gift, a box of Vietnam photos.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Really cool. But you're busy. I skimmed through it very hard. It was probably only 7 years after my dad passed away. I know it sounds like a lot, but you're still,
You're still
not in
hurting.
that place. You're not in that place. So once I started going into the 2020, when I started, we had a lot of time on our hands. I started really reading all those letters. I gained an appreciation for it. My mom never got there, I don't think. I don't think she ever got there. She didn't really. She resented, everything that the war, did to him.
So those letters that your father wrote, I got to ask this, because I had a similar experience with this. So the earliest letter that he wrote his sister, was it bright-eyed, idealistic? We're going to go out and we're going to get Charlie. We're going to do all this stuff. And then by the end, you start to, because the reality of war has hit him.
Most of it was cheery, upbeat. Going back to that first question, which was a great question, you talk about talent. Like, I never knew my dad. He was a really good writer. And I read, these are 3-page letters, but I know where I got it from. I mean, he was very introspective. Never talked about the danger and what they were going through.
So the reason I asked that is I have the letters that my uncle, who died in World War II, wrote my grandmother. All right. And he enlisted when he was 17, and he was killed in 43 in a plane crash. His first letter is, and I love the terminology. That's why I love those letters. It's like, I'm going to go get the Japs, which you can't really say Japs anymore, but he did. I'm going to go get the Jerrys. We're going to save the world. And then by the end, it's like, I just want to come home. I'm tired of this. This is ugly. And it was, you saw the digression of this idealism of going out and saving the world. Because we get it as cops all the time. It's where, you start and you're a rookie and you just go out there and you're gonna make a difference in everybody's life. And at the end, you're like, the fifth domestic at this house again. I don't care. Like, he lumped her up. What'd she do this time?
Yeah.
That's the type of apathy that you get, and war brings about that stuff. Combat brings about that stuff, and that's why I was interested in that stuff. So he didn't let any of that go.
He did not. Again, most of it was never talking about the danger that they were in. It wasn't until, and I think you're probably going to ask me about the how the story evolved, but where I read a letter that he wrote to one of his foxhole mates, right after he went home, and it was soldier to soldier, basically telling him what they had gone through, that there was a raid and an ambush, and they lost 12 members of the platoon a week after the other gentleman had left, went back home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was soldier on soldier, but there was none of that ever in the letters from my dad to his sister, to my aunt. It was there was a lot of humor to it. There was a lot of stuff.
Hey, I'm
that they're
okay.
going through. Yeah, we're fine.
I'm okay. I'm still thinking about you. I miss you.
Yeah, stuff like that. But I mean, I could really almost see him writing it and trying to let everyone know back home that there's nothing we could do, that don't feel sorry, and You know,
It's funny you say your father was this great writer, and he probably had a talent for it.
Sure.
If we want to go back to the social media question, and then you picked this up, like when did you start scribbling stuff down? I don't. It's a weird profession. It's not like, hey, we got a job opening as a reporter. Why don't you try it out?
yeah. I learned how to read from the newspaper, from the sports pages, from the box score, you know, the baseball box scores, right? Back in a time where, you know, newspapers were king. I mean, the amount of information that you would have at your fingertips for 35 cents or a quarter every day was unbelievable, right? And we always had the local newspaper, which was the News Tribune in Middlesex County, Woodbridge. We always had the New York Daily News, and I think we had the New York Post. We always had 3 newspapers every day, and we would talk about it at dinner, or we would, that's how I read every day. So I kind of, I morphed into it really. So I took a class in high school. Didn't really stick. I didn't really like the teacher. I went to college.
Like a journalism 101.
Yeah. Well, in high school it was just the school newspaper.
Oh, you got that's.
I didn't like it though. I didn't like it, and I didn't like the teacher. I didn't really, it was. So I didn't. I thought I was gonna go. I went to college to be a teacher, and like a month into it, I said, you know what, let me give it a try. And the sports editor, who's still like one of my best friends today, I just was in awe of what he was doing, and I kind of copied it from him, like emulated him, and.
Well,
I loved it. I fell in love with it right as soon as I did it.
It's funny when you read an article, and somebody who really knows how to write,
Mm-hmm.
when you read an article and you're swept away by that article, and you can see things in your head, and you can see whatever they're trying, the canvas that they're trying to paint. That to me is inspiring. Like I'm like, wow, that is unbelievable. It's I was that way with Shakespeare, right? So in college, I like you, I wanted to be a teacher, and I was heavily involved in all forms of Shakespeare, and because I could see it in my head, I could play that movie in my head. But with the paper, so it's funny. Most important person in my world is my grandfather, and he had an 8th grade education, but smartest man I ever knew because he read the newspaper every single day. And I can still see him sitting at his table with his coffee cup here, and he'd stir his coffee, and he'd hold it up like this, and he wouldn't drink his coffee. He would just stir it until one day I'm watching him stir his coffee, and the bottom drops right out. He stirred the bottom out of a coffee reading the newspaper. But it's a lost art that we don't have anymore.
No doubt.
Because there's no newspapers in the houses. Everything's at the tip of your fingers on your phone.
No doubt.
And the dinner table conversations, right? Like
Yeah.
learning, like that's something
doubt.
that's sort of fading into obscurity. And those letters could have,
No
if,
doubt.
if not, but for being saved.
Yeah.
So
Without question.
did you start writing for the college newspaper?
I did.
All right.
Yeah.
What was the first article you wrote?